Look, I'm just a geologist. I like rocks. I love rocks.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Geology Flannelcast. My name is Steve.
Hey, everyone. I'm Chris.
Good greetings. I'm Jesse.
Good greetings to you too, buddy.
Thanks.
And who else do we have here today?
Who managed to sneak in on this today?
The Kiwi, Matt Sophy.
Good friend of the podcast, Matt Sophy's here today. We got to bring back the guest for today. We haven't had a guest in a while, so we figured, change it up a little bit.
Speaking to us from the future.
Yes. Literally. 16 hours or 18 hours, you said, right?
18 hours. It is. We are recording this on Friday.
16
He is speaking to us from Saturday.
18? 16.
18.
I can't do my math.
Right? You said 18.
18.
Don't lie. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. I thought I was going crazy.
It's really cool that Zoom can Zoom all this, sync it all together, even though he's in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mind's blown.
I know. I'm telling you.
No, there's like no lag either. It's amazing. Guys on the other side of the world right now.
What's the weather like tomorrow?
Sunny.
Doesn't get old. Doesn't get
Nice
old.
and warm.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have an hour of this. So just strap in. It's not going to get any better.
And it's summertime there.
Yes.
I'm looking at snow out of my imaginary window, and
Yeah, I came out of we broke 50 the other day, and so a lot of the snow melted, and so today I was wearing my flip flops because
You wear the flip flops even in the snow, though.
yeah,
that came up in a work meeting the other day too. And someone said, "Yeah, we all have one person in the department who wears flip flops."
well, I came out of my basement the other today, and I don't know why I went up my basement stairs outside, but where they come out, it's like right in the back of the house, and so it's always shaded. And so I literally like stepped out, and it's still a foot of snow out there. And I was wearing my flip flops right into it. Pretty pleasant.
Not the first time, won't be the last time.
Yeah, it was
No,
fine.
that is true. This is a true story.
My feet were fine.
So, anyways, welcome everybody to the premier international geology podcast now. Thanks to Mr. Sophy over here, making it a global event this week. So we got a couple things we're gonna talk about today. So Matt's here. Matt lives in New Zealand right now, as you can tell from did we say that? Or yes, we already said that he's living in New Zealand right now. We'll talk about New Zealand geology coming up. But first, just kind of wanted to start off real fast, give a little shout out to a fan out there. We've been in the past, we've been talking about some glacial terms, especially some stuff from Iceland. And let's see, our friend of the podcast, how do you pronounce his name again?
I'm going to mess it up, so I apologize. You can also correct us later. Snjalfjord.
I thought it was Golfjord. Anyway.
Yeah.
We've been working on this.
SNJOLFUR.
Well, anyways, friend of the podcast here sent some really cool pronunciations, audio clips of some of these glacial terms that we've been talking about on the podcast over within the last couple of weeks or so. So we figured, why not give it a shot? Try to pronounce these properly after hours and hours of research here, trying to, practice this and work on these pronunciations. Let's give it a shot. So who you guys want to start this off?
No.
I will. Because I butchered them, so I'll take responsibility.
Okay.
So I'm going to mess them up again. So I think part of it is how we were using them, right? So we were saying Eldfjall and Jokult. We were using for volcano and glacier, respectively. And part of it was Eldfjall. I'm not doing that justice. We're using for volcano because it's the name of the volcano on Jaime, right? I think that's why we were talking about it.
Yeah, and it's a little more Eldfjall
Eldfjord.
Eldfjord.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a little harder end than the all.
Oh yeah, and because Eld is fire and Fjord is mountain, and so we were just. But apparently, the term we were sort of looking for. What was the term we were looking for? I lost it now. Well, we were right on Eldfjord, right? Eldfjord.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
But Jökull for glacier.
That was the one. Yeah.
That's the one. Because usually that just means any sort of ice or moving body of ice. What we were actually looking for. Oh man, I forgot to practice this one. So who wants to take it?
Well,
yeah.
Well, the first term you were saying, let me try this. It's pronounced Jökull.
Jökull. Yeah.
Jökull.
Yeah.
Jökull. Okay. I think that's about as good as we're going to get.
Yeah.
And then, but the other term is, we get the pronunciation.
Skridiohook.
Skridiohook.
Yeah. Again, we apologize. We're
trying.
We'll practice some more. How much money's in the budget for us to just actually do this immersively? We just go to Iceland. That's the best way to learn a language.
I think we have enough money in the budget right now to watch a YouTube video.
All right, I'm on it.
Let me try this one more time. Oh man, let's see. Here we go. Skridiohook. That means glacier in Norwegian.
Which no, Icelandic is
glacier. Oh, sorry, Icelandic. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Isbri is in Norwegian.
We all speak Norwegian. Come on, Chris.
Creeping ice, creeping or crawling ice is what that means.
Yeah. So
creeping and crawling, yes, yawing.
So Jökull is ice, and so I guess the skrid part of it is creeping, right?
It real.
Screed. Yeah, that's
get it. Creeping it real.
Creeping it real. That's the
anyways
tagline of this episode.
Truly international podcast here today. We're really doing our best, hitting up.
Well, are there glaciers in New Zealand?
Yeah, on the mountain.
Right?
Yeah.
There's high mountains, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Alpine
North and South Island actually.
What?
Yep. There's glaciers on the there's a big volcano here on the North Island called Ruapehu. That one has a couple of glaciers on it that last the year around. And then on the South Island, massive glaciers in the Southern Alps mountain range. And we'll probably talk about that a bit later, but yeah.
Neat. Do you ever go skiing?
Cool.
Yeah. There's you can ski, both North and South Island, but the South Island skiing is pretty magical. It's, views looked like Middle Earth from Lord of the Rings, which was a little plug there for the New Zealand film industry. Filmed here in New Zealand.
You don't say. So, well, anyway, thank you so much for sending out the Icelandic pronunciations. That was awesome. And yeah, so let's move on to the New Zealand stuff, I guess. So, Matt, what's your specialty? What's your background in?
So I know these guys, the three amigos from Temple. So that's where I did my bachelor's degree. Actually, we can start way back. So I was born in a small town, Pottsville. But actually, Jesse and I are from the same town in Pennsylvania. So I should probably point that out. Yep. And you probably talked about that in your coal episodes, but I don't think we're talking about those anymore.
But we can. We can.
We tend to talk about coal in every episode.
Yeah. So yeah.
Matt, I sent you an email. Don't mention coal. Come on.
Just shut up. Yeah. So from Pennsylvania, I did my bachelor's at Temple University. So that's where I met these three guys and Maddie as well when he was the chemistry department. And then now I work in the geothermal industry. So I moved here to New Zealand about a year ago. So I work for a geothermal power company here located in the North Island. And, we sit on top of a volcano and which provides heat, which makes steam. We extract it out of the ground with wells, and steam turns a turbine and generator, and we make green renewable electricity. So that's how I am here today.
So Matt, for people that are interested in getting to the geothermal field, what should they try? What should their background be? What type of classes should they take? And what should they do academically if they're interested in getting into the geothermal industry?
So geothermal kind of pulls from multiple disciplines in earth science. So, you definitely want to start by just taking all the typical requisite classes in undergrad. So you need a bit of hydrology because you're studying how water moves to the ground and how it changes phase to steam. You need a bit of mineralogy because you need to know how that hot water changes the rock composition under different temperature and pressure conditions. Need a bit of structural geology to understand how faults and cracks move those fluids around. Geophysics, because we can't always see everything in the subsurface. So geophysics helps us to do that. So yeah, bit of everything, bit of a generalist.
All right, cool. And so how long have you been in the geothermal industry for now?
I started in 2012. So
okay,
almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years. Man, yeah. Time flies, doesn't it?
Crazy.
Time flies, man.
So because you started working, you were in Nevada originally, right?
Yep.
Out in Reno, when you got your first gig, right?
Yeah. So yeah, as in the East Coast, Pennsylvania doesn't have any active tectonic margins. So there's not a readily available heat for conventional geothermal, which turns hot water into steam. So we
just talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. There are hot water springs on the East Coast, and I had no idea. Some in Alabama and West Virginia.
Well, Virginia,
Virginia,
hot springs and warm springs. They don't really understand how that works, though.
Yeah, but
that's very enigmatic.
Yeah. Blew my mind.
Anywhere where you can get water circulating deep through faults and cracks, it can get hot. Because the Earth it's hot everywhere at tens of kilometers down. But near the plate boundaries, those faults and cracks tend to be a bit more active and open, so it's easier for the water to get down there. And then as a result of that water over geologic time brings heat much shallower to the surface, so you can you don't have to drill quite as deep. So I've always lived on plate margins for work.
And I should give a plug here. We've had Matt on in the past before. Pre-hiatus.
Yeah, October of 2014.
And you were in, I want to say, Indonesia or the Philippines. You were on Mount Sinabung. We were talking about Mount Sinabung.
Yeah.
You were working.
Yeah, I was working in Indonesia. So I was traveling back and forth between Sumatra, which is the furthest west island in Indonesian archipelago. And then I was living in Reno at the time. But yeah, full disclosure, there may have been some incorrect facts in that podcast, but yeah, definitely give it a listen, and pop your questions in, and I'd be happy to answer them now with 6 or 7 years more experience. So
yeah, if you check us out on Google Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it's episode 15, I think it was.
Yeah.
Ooh, early days.
What are we? Is this episode 83?
I believe that's correct.
Might be episode 83. Wow.
Yes, 83.
Time flies. All right, so. Matt, New Zealand. Tell us everything you know about. No,
all right.
I can start off Can we start off tectonically? So big picture.
Yeah.
Right. What's the tectonic setting of New Zealand for people that are completely in the dark on this topic?
Okay, so as we do some explanations, I'd say when you're listening to this, you can pause a podcast. Google Maps and things.
What?
And it would be good to do that because, not everyone knows exactly where New Zealand is. So I'll try and annotate these things. Mm-hmm. And then, you can follow along with the map, pause, replay, pop your questions in. So, so to answer Chris's question, New Zealand lies along the boundary of the Pacific Plate and the Australian Indian Plates. So many of you are familiar with the Ring of Fire, Pacific Plate, and its ring of associated volcanoes and faults around it.
Yeah, Johnny Cash did a song about it.
He did.
What
He was an
came
inspiring
first?
geologist.
What came first, Johnny Cash's song or the geologic term of Ring of Fire? Do we know this?
Ooh.
Ah,
Ooh.
Oh, Johnny Cash's song was pre-plate tectonics, but they probably had the Ring of Fire before plate tectonics. So
I don't know. Johnny Cash, geologist.
We'll put that out there to our listeners.
yeah,
I don't know.
Ah.
if you know the answer to that,
So the Pacific Plate, as you know, is oceanic crust. So it's thin. It's made of mafic minerals, so it's quite dense. It tends to subduct underneath lighter, denser continental plates. So the Pacific Plate in New Zealand subducts beneath the Australian Indian Plate. So that's on the North Island of New Zealand. We have a conventional subduction zone where the plate is subducting underneath, and behind that trench to the west is a chain of volcanoes that's forming. And actually that chain of volcanoes is where I work.
Well, hold on.
Hmm.
What about Zealandia?
So Zealandia, we want to go there.
Well, we did a whole episode on it, episode 56 back in August.
Ah. Tell me about Zealandia.
I'd have to play that.
You tell us.
Matt,
Okay.
you'd be surprised. When we came back, like 50% of the listener questions was like, "Tell me about Zealandia." Like
a lot of people
everything
wanted
else
to know
was
about
all
this.
over the place, but then half of the people were like, "So what's up with Zealandia?"
It must have been in an emerging topic in geology.
I think it
Maybe-
was. There was a new paper because it came out in an original concept came out, I believe, in the 90s.
Yeah, like the late 90s, like 98 or something like that.
I think it might even be an early 90s. So, anyways,
Yeah.
regardless, sometime in the 1990s. But there was a new article in the news. I guess it was making way around the science websites and stuff like that about they're kind of pushing it forward a little bit about the.
Well, there was that horrific eruption in 2019. I don't know, maybe that kickstarted it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so does your work refer to it as like the Pacific Plate and the Australian Plate, or do they talk about Zealandia? Do they refer to it as its own plate yet?
They refuse to acknowledge it.
So we refer to it as the Australian Plate.
Okay.
And to my knowledge, the Zealandia is something. It's a series of accreted terrains that are shoved onto the side of the Australian Plate.
Huh.
And so those accreted terrains start at the Cambrian 500 million years and go to the present. So the Australian Indian Plate was attached to Gondwana land. So they were that supercontinent that was attached to Antarctica. They all kind of split and shuffled around. And then, so New Zealand's always been kind of on the side of that plate. So it's got a bunch of sediments that were shed off of different origins or mountain ranges, and then shoved on, metamorphosed, and kind of crammed onto the side. So that's,
and Australia being as old as it is, it's like 500 million.
yeah. And
like
then they didn't get
youngin'.
along. Yeah, they didn't get along so much that there's a failed rift in between New Zealand and Australia as well that they've mapped out with geophysics over the ocean floor.
Huh,
So
I
you can check that out.
did
Very
not know
cool.
about that. The
Yeah.
idea of accreted terrains is something that's sort of interesting because I was just in my physical geology class, was just teaching this, where I teach plate tectonics, and we talk about like, oh, crust is formed at mid-ocean ridges, it's oceanic crust, and crust is destroyed at subduction or recycled or whatever, at subduction zone, and it's always oceanic crust. So if you're only creating oceanic crust and you're only destroying oceanic crust, where does continental crust come from?
Yeah.
And it sort of leads into the idea about accreted terrain, where during subduction you get parts of it that sort of get scraped off or get detached and whatnot.
It's not meteorites.
Or it's not. It might be meteorites, or it's like I do talk about like fractionation of the magma from the volcanism at subduction zones.
Yeah. And I guess I should clarify, accreted terrain is probably not quite exactly the word, because, on the West Coast, accreted terrains are little island arcs that eventually kind of got shoved on over various trenches and subduction zones and scraped. Whereas New Zealand is graywackies and metamorphic sandstones, turbidity current type deposits that have just kind of been shoved on to the continent. So it's not quite accreted terrain, but
it's almost like it's like the melange where, right?
Yeah.
Where okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
So, yeah, Pacific plate subducting underneath the Australian plate on the North Island. And then that plate boundary then cuts through New Zealand. And as you go south on the North Island, the southern tip of the North Island is where the capital is. It's a city called Wellington. It's quite beautiful, very active fault area. And so in that zone, the subduction is transitioning to right lateral strike slip faulting. So you're now having a transform plate boundary on the side of a subduction zone. So that right lateral strike slip fault on a large scale is called the Alpine Fault. And that strike slip fault is constantly accumulating stress because of the subduction zone. And then occasionally it ruptures, which has resulted in several very large earthquakes in human time in New Zealand, which have caused quite a bit of destruction. Some pretty famous ones were in the 1930s, the city of Napier was destroyed and then later rebuilt in 1930s Art Deco style. So it's pretty cool architecture in that downtown area.
Oh, no kidding.
And then, and then probably the most famous earthquakes are between 2010 and 2011 that happened in Christchurch, which is the largest city in the South Island. So in September 2010, there was a large earthquake that struck a bit away from Christchurch, but damaged a lot of the older buildings. So
yeah, it was pretty big, right? It was like an 8 or something.
Yeah, I think it was like 7 or an 8.
Yeah.
And that's, the geophysicists can probably correct me, but that's pretty high for the magnitude you can get on a strike slip fault. But there's a component of, subduction type stress vectors that are allowing more stress to build up, resulting in much larger earthquakes. So because New Zealand, didn't have a lot of modern engineering associated with its buildings, a lot of them were brick and mortar buildings, so they were completely destroyed during that earthquake. And then later in February 2011, there was another earthquake that occurred, and it didn't actually rupture a fault on the surface, but it occurred in the subsurface, and it was just east of Christchurch, and it shook the city so much, the buildings that were already damaged, many more of them were completely destroyed after that. And then large parts of the city were built on a floodplain, so those neighborhoods suffered intense liquefaction. So the whole neighborhoods were just completely inundated with mud that, when it hardened, was like the consistency of cement.
Wow.
Oh,
go ahead, Justin.
I was just going to say, I was looking at pictures of the liquefaction. You can see cars where they're like up to their tires, and it's just like it looks like a solid surface, but it was liquefaction where they sunk into it. It wasn't as magnitude powerful as you 6.3, which is that's pretty.
6.3 is pretty big, but
it's strong for. There was a 7.1 on the Canterbury earthquake the year before.
Yeah,
I think that's the one I was thinking of. But
yeah.
Which is big.
So real fast, we should just mention what the term liquefaction means in case there's people listening that don't know that term. That just means so when you get an earthquake, you get these in areas where you have this fine-grained sediment. When the seismic waves start propagating through that fine-grained sediment, it kind of acts like quicksand, and it's very unstable. Buildings will sink down into it, and it can do a lot of structural damage. So that's what liquefaction is.
Yeah, and so you don't want to build on top of floodplains if you're in an earthquake-prone area.
Yeah, that's what also messed up San Francisco in when did they get that 1906?
And more so, 1906 was the resulting fire, but Loma Prieta in 89.
Yeah,
they had infilled a lot of the bay area and built on top of it. So you have that sort of
and you can look, the USGS has great hazard maps. They essentially, and I'll teach about this stuff, those infill areas, the USGS literally has maps that says this is really dangerous to live here. But meanwhile, a mile away, if your house is built on bedrock, not dangerous at all. And you can also see like destruction maps, and it's not just like a radiating circle away from the earthquake. It depends on what you're built on. Like some areas really far away will be totally devastated, whereas other areas really close will be fine. And it all depends on, what the building codes are, what you're built on, and yada yada.
There's a famous photo of, well, if you just do a quick Google of like the Anchorage earthquake in 1963, you'll always see that classic. It's a department store, and the street level has just dropped way below the entrance of the department store, and it's because it's built on permafrost, and so the shaking heated up the ground and melted all of the frozen water, and so the ground essentially became liquefied, and so it destabilized everything. But whenever you say don't build on floodplains, I think of do you know the famous picture of like the apartment block?
Oh yeah. I think that was Japan
or Russia, and the entire building, this entire apartment building is tipped over sideways. The building is fine, but the ground became unstable, and so the whole building is sort of lopsided. There's the skyscraper in Taiwan, but I'm thinking of this apartment block.
I know the exact. Yeah. I know the exact thing that you're talking about. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. But there's actually a lot of pictures of. Oh, here I found it. I'll put it in our chat here. Yeah. But
we'll post these on the website.
Chat.
So
real quick, there's a lot of pictures of buildings kind of getting all crooked from the liquefaction. But,
circling back, do you ever get nervous, Matt, drilling into volcanoes to get hot water?
It's like a disaster movie.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like I feel like this is like a Dr. Evil plot.
So yeah, I mean that could always happen, right? But probability is probably low. But I could, offhand say that there's 2 published instances of geothermal wells drilling into magma. Probably dikes that were intruding along faults.
And what's the result of that happening?
So I guess I should say the 2 instances of it happening were once in Iceland and at the I can't pronounce the name of the field. It will come to me.
All right, so it's a field in Iceland. Okay.
But so I guess like the person in our department had pictures of it on their door for a while, right? Like, is this a crater or is this a really bad day drilling?
Yeah, and so I guess I should say when that happened in Iceland, it didn't actually result in a catastrophic event. It's not quite as sexy as you would think. And I should say, actually, I just thought of the name. The name is Krafla, Krafla. People wanted to look it up. So when that happens, you're drilling pretty far down, so several kilometers or a couple of miles down. And when they're drilling, they use drilling mud, so that's heavy weighted fluid. So it's got actually a lot of force on it. It's able to push down. So the magma actually doesn't come blasting out of the well like you would think in a science fiction disaster movie. But what does happen is the drilling bit can get stuck, so it can kind of punch through the crust of the magma where it's hardened, and then kind of dive into the new material, and it could get stuck. And then in Iceland, what they found was the drilling, they break the rock up into little bits and circulate it out with the drilling mud to the surface, and they could see volcanic glass. And so basically what was thought to be happening is that they drill into the new magma, it quenches with the cool drilling mud, and then turns into glass, and they bring it up to the surface. So
that's crazy.
That's awesome.
So I imagine your drill bits like shot after that, and whatever type of piping you have down there, that's all Just
Yeah, it does.
I imagine
It
the whole
does
thing
get
just gets
hot.
gummed up, and it's just
do you have to abandon that borehole then,
exactly.
or do you?
So yeah, I think, and I can pop the published papers in there, but in Iceland they cemented that section of the hole back, so they plugged the hole and then they drilled off in another direction to fix it.
Okay.
So
And that is a big. I mean, these holes cost millions of dollars.
yeah,
This is not just like you're drilling a hole in the backyard to put in a water well. This is like Matt said, miles down, kilometers down, at multiple millions of dollars each hole. So if you screw up, that could bankrupt you.
I feel like I remember one time I was on a drilling rig and we were drilling shallow, looking. The purpose was to look for aquifers, but I was there to look at just sediment. And we lost the hole collapsed on us, and so we lost like the rods, and we didn't even bother trying to get them back up. And I was like, shouldn't we try and pull those out? And the one guy was literally like with his foot kicking dirt over the hole, and he's like, nope, we're just gonna pretend this never happened. And I feel like if I was in Iceland and I like hit magma or something, that's what I'd be doing. Just like kicking dirt.
I see nothing
here.
yeah. So I should say another plug about the Iceland thing is that they were specifically targeting to drill scientific wells that with the hope of getting very close to magma. So it was super hot and high pressure. So they would get super critical conditions where there's incredible amounts of energy compared to conventional geothermal steam. So they were trying to get close to the magma body, but they ended up just poking into it.
Going a little too close.
Yeah. Mission accomplished.
Yeah. But to my knowledge, that has not happened in New Zealand. It's a bit of a different geologic environment. I
know I get that question a lot from my students. Like, why would you drill into the side of a volcano? It's like, well, there's lots of stuff that go into it.
Yeah.
They're not just, let's put a hole here. Let's see how far we can go.
And in New Zealand, actually, historically, what has happened is the not understanding geologic conditions below the drill pad. And in the olden days of geothermal, you would just drill your well right next to a hot spring or a geothermal feature such as a fumarole or steaming ground, because that's seems like a pretty good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But actually what can happen when you drill next to those is that the shallow aquifer is basically this at boiling point conditions. So similar to the way a geyser works is that water in a chamber is filled, and any amount of depressurization allows that water to immediately boil and then want to rise to the surface because it's changing from water to steam. And so what has happened is, you're drilling very shallow, and you can get a shallow steam kick or a boiling event where that water flashes and turns to steam and comes up in the well. And in that case, you would see steam at the surface, and it would be quite dangerous.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
I'll say that that's bad, right?
Yeah, I've never heard that term before. Steam kick. I like it.
Yeah. So that's a.
It's not like a blowout with oil and gas. Like this is just steam.
Yeah, it's the same concept. Is that when you're saying blowout, you basically the pressure in the well is higher than what you have control with the drilling mud. So it blows the drilling mud out.
I'm assuming drilling mud for geothermal is probably slightly different to handle the different temperature regimes, or is it pretty similar?
It's pretty similar. But the biggest thing that they have to do is they have to keep the drilling mud cool, because you are drilling through really hot rocks. So they have lots of different ways of chilling the mud that they trickle it down in mud waterfalls before it gets circulated back into the well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So Matt, let's get back to
bring it back.
New Zealand a little bit. What's the geothermal scene in New Zealand like? Is it pretty hopping?
Yeah, geothermal scene in New Zealand is actually pretty strong. New Zealand was one of the first countries to use geothermal steam to make electricity. Brief kind of cool story is that so the Italians were actually the first people on Earth to use steam to make electricity, and they have there's a place in Tuscany in Italy where there's shallow volcanic rocks that are hot, that the unique conditions there that just produces just pure steam under the ground. So the Italians, before World War II, had small power plants and they were powering villages and towns. And as you know, in World War II, the Allies invaded Europe. So the Allies included the United States, Great Britain, and New Zealand, many others, Canada, Australia. But the New Zealanders were working their way up through the Italian peninsula, and they came across these geothermal power stations in Italy and said, hey, we have hot springs at home. Maybe we have the same thing the Italians do. So it was kind of like the inspiration for geothermal in New Zealand. So then after World War II, the Kiwis all came home and country was growing and needed electricity. And so then the government started investing in geothermal drilling and built power stations. So the first geothermal power station in New Zealand was commissioned in 1958.
That's
really incredible. Cool. That's a great
cool story. Yeah, it's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go Allies.
Yeah.
World War II, bringing us nothing but joy.
And so New Zealand's a bit
Too
different
soon?
than the Italian scenario. So in New Zealand was the first place where they were taking reservoir fluid that was just liquid and drilling a well into it. And then because that liquid is kilometers under the ground, there's lots of pressure. The density of a column of water is rho GH. So density times the gravity constant times the height. And there's quite a bit of pressure down there. So you drill a well, and that's connected to the surface, which has zero pressure at the surface. So you allow that water to flow into the well. It flows just like an artesian aquifer would. So it's flowing from high pressure to low. And as it's coming in, because it's hot and because of the thermodynamic properties of water, which are quite unique, it flashes into steam. So they're actually taking hot water, allowing it to depressurize, harnessing that steam, and then putting it through the power cycle. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah, but we don't have to talk about geothermal if you guys don't want. We can do New Zealand geology.
No, I mean that's really cool stuff, man. I think it all kind of ties in.
Yeah.
So I guess so what's I guess in terms of New Zealand, what are the let's talk about the mountains in New Zealand, because New Zealand has some pretty amazing mountains, as you said, like obviously Hollywood has taken advantage of this scenery. And so what now let's see, what are the different mountain ranges? Is there like, was it two distinct set of mountain ranges in New Zealand?
Caledonia,
because there's the Southern Alps, right?
Yeah.
And then what else do we got in New Zealand?
So I guess I'll break it down by geomorphic province, because all these big mountain ranges probably have a bunch of smaller ones that are different faults or different rock types. But so on the South Island is the Great Alpine Fault. So it's the right lateral strike slip fault. But I never finished the story. Sorry. But as you go on strike of the Alpine Fault, if you come down to the south end of the South Island, subduction starts again. But surprise, subduction is happening in the opposite direction. So down there, the Australian plate is subducting beneath the Pacific plate. And so you have New Zealand is basically two subduction zones on the north and south, shoving the country in, it's crushing it. And then accommodating that crush in the middle is a right lateral strike slip fault. So it's kind of a scissors action. And just a quick shout out to Dr. Meyer from Temple University Geology Department. He's introduced me to the concept of New Zealand scissor tectonics many, many years ago when I was a young student. And then it's one of those things where someone tells you and then it doesn't really make sense until 15 years later. And you're like, oh.
You find yourself there and you're like,
now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Samsonite, I was way off.
So anyway, so what's happening is because of that crushing action on both sides, the mountains are uplifting quite quickly. So it is a strike slip fault, but faults can change direction. And then depending on the way that fault's striking, sometimes you can get pop-up blocks or you can get extending basins, and you guys can probably talk all about that. But the Southern Alps are the result of that, along that strike slip fault, intense rapid uplift of mountains. So these are really, really young, tall mountains.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I got the rate. Can I bring my numbers in?
Do it.
Bring them.
So I looked at the rates real quick. So in the Miocene into the Pliocene, so like whatever the Miocene was, 5 million to 2 million, I think was Miocene to Pliocene. It maxed out at like 5 millimeters a year, which is, it's all right. But from the Pleistocene to the recent, the upper rate that I've got here from this paper was in Geological Society of London. It's old too, so take it with a grain of salt. It's from the early 80s, but they're looking at 14 millimeters a year. And just using 14 millimeters a year, you're looking at something, just, I'm going to convert it to imperial here. That's 14 millimeters is half an inch or 0.6 inches. And so per year, so over 1,000 years, that's 45 feet.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Which, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, oh, that's not too bad. But if you do 1 million years, so the Pleistocene, 1.8 to 2, depending on which time scale you're using, just for 1 million years at that rate is 45,000 feet, which is more than Mount Everest. That's 8 miles, over 8 miles of uplift. It's an insane rate.
So on that erosion rate, you're uplifting these mountains, and then New Zealand is an island out on its own, and to the west is the Tasman Sea. So you get these big storms and rain events that come through, and in the winter, snow. So you get accumulating snow, turns to ice, turns to glaciers. So intense erosion action happening. And basically on the east side of the Southern Alps is a geomorphic province called the Canterbury Plain. So the Canterbury Plain is just this massive alluvial basin that's formed as a result of all these rivers that are connected to glacial lakes, which are connected to glaciers. So there's this constant sediment supply that's always pushing it out. So the Canterbury Plain is a really fertile agriculture area that's on the east half of the South Island. And hence back to the earthquake. So it's young sediments with shallow water table, and then you shake it because these faults are constantly rupturing, and it's just a recipe for geologic hazards.
Yeah.
Man, it sounds like there's a lot going on. It's
it's pretty full on. And if you ever look at pictures of the New Zealand, the lakes in the Southern Alps, they're just this incredible light blue color because of all the sediment in them that's basically scattering the sunlight. And so they're just really, really picturesque.
Nice.
I didn't realize that's why. I can picture those lakes in my head, and I didn't realize that's the reason.
Actually, I think for the tourism ads, they dump a certain color in there to make it
a little Photoshop action going on.
Nah, just kidding. They don't do that. I'll probably get in trouble for saying that.
Like
They'll kick you out, man.
No, but that is
for St. Patty's Day when it turns green.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the interesting fact that I learned about New Zealand, I'm going to say weeks ago as I was studying up for this, not an hour before the podcast, but there's shield volcanoes on the southern island.
Yep.
And then which you would typically associate with kind of like a hotspot.
Hotspot or divergent.
Right.
Divergent, or you could get that as they're just little leftover remnants of a former subduction zone.
Yeah. And it's just, usually when you have a region, you have a typical type of volcano. Like up in the north, you have, your composite cinder cones, but then down in the south, they have some of these shield volcanoes, and it blew I was like, how do you have two different types of volcanoes in the same region? Now, again, New Zealand is, Matt was saying before we started recording, if you went from Maine, it stretches all the way down to almost South Carolina or to South Carolina. So that is a big difference. So, but yeah, I thought that was incredible.
Yeah. And then another cool fact about volcanoes is the city of Auckland which is, further west from so Auckland is the biggest city in New Zealand. I think it's something like just over 2 million people. It's on the North Island, but it's actually located west of the main volcanic belt on the North Island, where the subduction zone gets to the depth that the rocks are able to melt. I think that's called Benioff zone or something like that.
Well, so the Benioff zone is
Benioff Watati.
Yeah, it's you can see the angle of subduction from the depths. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, Auckland is it's built on top of a basically recently active basaltic volcanic field. So the Auckland is, if you look at it in just Google Maps and you go into terrain mode, you can see the city, all around the city are just these little cinder cones, and it makes for a really cool landscape. And there's one very young volcano out in the harbor, and it's called Rangitoto Island. And, it was erupting just a couple of 100 years ago. So it was witnessed by Maori people who were living in Auckland before the Europeans arrived. So it's pretty cool. It's the biggest city in New Zealand, and it's sitting on top of potentially active volcanic zone.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Take that, Pompeii.
Well, I mean, it's probably those basaltic, volcanic eruptions would be preempted by, seismic activity and things. Right. But you can look on, so the USGS equivalent in New Zealand is called GNS. It's geological and nuclear science, but
they have them all together. Okay.
Yeah.
They have some really cool specific web pages, and you can look at the Auckland volcanic field and see what their plan is and that kind of stuff. But if you look right now in New Zealand, the big HAPS is the America's Cup. So it's a big sailboat race. And so it's just these picturesque, these really fancy sailboats, and they're sailing out in the harbor. And then every so often you get a shot of Rangitoto Island. So it's just this beautiful little cinder cone covered in trees. And it's, as a geologist, you see that as like, oh, that is a volcano.
So, all right, what's personal question here?
Ooh.
Here we go. Getting in-depth, intimate with Matt Sophy here.
What's your astrological sign?
Yeah.
No, what's your favorite area of New Zealand? Like, what do you think? Like, prettiest landscape? Like what's the area? Because this is like the area that everyone's just like, holy crap, this place looks like like Narnia. Like, what? Is there any particular place that jumps out of your mind that you've seen?
Well, I guess I should premise it, which is, I've only been in New Zealand a year, so I haven't seen everything. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of places that are probably pretty beautiful that some of the listeners would correct me, but
what's a personally, it's just, whatever you think. This is, there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah. So what I would say, for me, the most beautiful part of New Zealand is it's an area called the Coromandel Peninsula. So you can Google that. And so it's on the North Island. And it's actually geologically, it's the remnants of the subduction zone and associated volcanic arc. So it's that volcanic belt has moved a bit east in modern times. Mm-hmm. So it's just a really rugged peninsula with lots of forests and extinct volcanoes. There's a long history of gold mining. There's a very famous gold mine there called Waihi Gold Mine. But the beaches are just fantastic.
That's what I'm looking at right now. Yeah,
just fantastic beaches, man.
So it looks like I'm looking at these pictures of the sea cliffs. Yeah, and it almost looks like it's like limestone or chalk.
Huh.
It's like so those. Rock, I mean, I'm just looking at a picture, and it just looks pure white. So what's going on there?
It could be. I'm not a geologic expert of the Coromandel, but I would suspect it's either some kind of pyroclastic rocks from the volcanics, or it could be recent shore deposits that are uplifted because of that active subduction. The islands are both always in a state of uplift and erosion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. This looks beautiful. I had no idea about this area.
Yeah, on the tourism board.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Yeah, there's a famous beach there that they film heaps of movies there. But I guess I should say that the beaches for me as an American, growing up in Pennsylvania, we would go to the beach, 1 week out of the year. We'd go to New Jersey, and New Jersey is a very nice beach. But it's a passive margin, so they're just big, long coastal plains. But in New Zealand, it's typically pretty rugged coastline, and because there's just not that many people, there's only 5 million people in the entire country. You usually get the beach to yourself, and it's just really cool.
That's amazing.
Hey, so I got another question about New Zealand, and just kind of doing a little bit of research work for this. Yeah, I've been reading that the backbone of New Zealand is made of greywacke, greywacke sandstone. So, what is that? Is that all just that's all just stuff like related from the volcanics, basically? Or I was also reading there's like a lot of there's some turbidites that are mixed in there.
That's the accreted terrain, right?
Yeah, that's not accreted. It's whatever is getting shoved up on the subduction zone. Yep. So yeah, the greywacke is the probably the most common bedrock in New Zealand. And
how about I was not expecting.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy thinking about greywacke.
Well, I mean, you know that shale is the most common rock type on Earth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's not sexy, but it gets the job done.
You heard it first right here.
That's my motto in life, I guess.
There's somebody out there yelling right now. I think shale is sexy. What are you talking about?
Great. Now everybody's gonna hate me.
I think we have a new T-shirt design. Shale. It's not sexy, but it gets the job done.
Shale is the new sexy, I guess.
Shale is actually a really important rock.
Yeah, it's future.
Absolutely.
Future slate.
Yeah, and anyway.
And or oil and gas reservoirs.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't gonna go there, I wasn't gonna go there. Anyway, I'm trying to think of some other cool facts that I had to point out. So we talked about the Alpine Fault. We talked about geothermal. We talked about Auckland volcanic field.
Have you experienced any earthquakes in the 1 year since you've been out there?
Yeah, you feel them. Some little ones like 2s and 3s.
Okay.
Yep. Actually,
spoken like a Californian.
Yeah, right.
Just 2s and 3s.
Well, actually, and where we are, so I guess I should have said this. I live in a town called Taupo, and so it's right next to a big caldera lake with the same name, Lake Taupo. You can look it up. It's the biggest lake in New Zealand. It's in the middle of the North Island.
Yeah, it looks pretty.
It's beautiful. So we do get earthquakes, but not anything like the further south you go. So Wellington is always having bigger earthquakes, and same with the South Island as well. So but yeah, 2s and 3s will definitely. Sometimes you can sleep through them. Sometimes they'll wake you up. Just depends.
And Taupo was a big caldera, right?
Yeah, so it's a series of big ignimbrite, massive super volcano type eruptions, Yellowstone scale. And so the lake in its current shoreline is the coalescence of several of those volcanoes erupting on different structural margins and things. So yeah, I think I don't actually know the most recent of the eruptions. Is probably I should know that, but
last erupted 1,800 years ago.
Thank you.
Man, they got a bunch of thermal pools out there. Like it looks kind of like the pools at least look a little Yellowstone-esque with like the kind of that like that green color and then the orange rim around the lakes and stuff. Like it looks really, really pretty. My gosh.
Yeah. And what's cool about New Zealand is there is a lot of geothermal energy that's been developed here. So when you develop a geothermal system, you are redistributing the pressure. This is how I like to say it. So you're moving water around, you're pulling it out in some locations and re-injecting it in others. So it can have some effect on the thermal features, hot springs, fumaroles, and things. But what has happened in New Zealand is some of the geothermal systems are protected, and they'll be protected forever. So they're basically preserved in their what would be natural state. So you can go and visit some of these sites, which is really cool. Two of the most famous features in New Zealand are, one is called the Champagne Pool. So this is the one that Chris is talking about. So it's a hot spring, and then it's got a bunch of bacteria, extremophile type bacteria that are doing oxidation and reduction in the lower temperature waters on the rim of the lake and make this beautiful orange color. And then there's also a really famous geyser that's in a town about an hour north of Taupo called Rotorua. And that geyser, it's constantly erupting. It's a beautiful sight that you can see it when you drive into town.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it
really
says
nice.
that eruption 1,800 years ago, 1,800 years ago was the most violent the world has experienced in the last 5,000 years. So
Yeah.
I guess more violent than
Tambora.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to be around for one of those.
No, you definitely want to, get some distance between yourself and the volcano for that.
You're living next to it.
Yeah. So I wanted to read off a couple of stats that I had written down. These don't have anything to do with geology, but they're New Zealand stats.
I love.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we ready?
Wait, hang on. Did you write all these down on a Word document?
I did.
Yes.
Wow. Look at this segue.
Yeah. So for all you out there who need help troubleshooting anything that comes to a Word related document, please check out the formattingformula.com or YouTube/C/formatting formula. They have on the YouTube videos, they have all different kinds of videos for even older versions of Word too, on how to do stuff, how to do headers, how to do footers, how to insert figures and have the text wrapped around it, or how to, set up your bookmarks, all that stuff. You could teach yourself from the YouTube videos, or you can just go to formattingformula.com, email them, or, send in a request, say like, I have this issue, and they are fantastic. But even more important than that, make sure you tell them Geology Flannelcast sent you, because let's face it, that's where they get most of their businesses from, this podcast. So I'm sure the formatting formula people are like, wait, what?
You heard it here first.
Yeah. All right. Maybe not half of their customers, but either way.
It should also be known that Steve is not a statistician either. So I mean,
that's true. Math is not my forte. Neither is Word. And I don't need it to be, because I have people for that now. Formattingformula.com.
Just running the numbers quick. All of their customers come from us.
Thanks. You heard it here first, folks. So check them out, formattingformula.com or YouTube/C/formatting formula. Don't forget to tell them the Geology Flannelcast sent you. So thanks, Matt, for that awesome segue with your stats written down on a Word document.
Feel like you didn't even realize you were being drawn into that.
Yeah.
I feel so used. Okay, so a few facts. Okay, here we go. So the largest city is Auckland, North Island, 1.7 million people, built on top of a cinder cone volcanic field. Capital is Wellington, 415,000 people. The airport is actually built on top of a uplifted seabed that occurred during an earthquake in 1800s. And it's also maybe one of the most beautiful capital cities that I've ever seen. I would highly recommend just a quick Google of Wellington Harbor. Christchurch, the largest city on the South Island, 380,000 people. We talked about those two terrible earthquakes, 2010 and 2011. So here's some other population stats. So 68,000 Kiwi birds estimated in New Zealand. So Kiwi birds, flightless bird. It's kind of the national symbol of New Zealand. They're really cool little creatures. There's different varieties of them, but
how do they taste?
They've had a rough run because you probably want to bring an ecologist on to talk about the ecology of New Zealand, but because it was a continent basically separated from everything else for millions of years, it developed its own animal population, and so these Kiwi birds were flightless. They're kind of like chickens on the ground. And when predators came here, mostly rats and weasels, they would eat their eggs. So it would destroy their population. So Kiwi birds are on the mend, but they're a cool symbol of New Zealand. 6.1 million dairy cows in New Zealand.
All right.
So milk is one of the top exports of New Zealand. It gets shipped to overseas markets.
Wait, so there's more cows than people?
More cows than people. And wait for the next stat.
All right. Oh,
26 million sheep.
I was gonna say,
wow. Wow.
I thought sheep were big. Yeah.
Yeah. So wool is, sheep can grow, or sheep can live in pretty rough, rugged, dry conditions. So in the South Island, the east side of the Southern Alps is often a rain shadow. So it's really dry, rugged country. And so sheep do pretty well there. New Zealand wool products are some of the best in the world.
I have some fun facts about New Zealand. First country to see the sunrise, apparently.
Oh.
But I guess it's arbitrary, like.
Okay.
I don't know. I just had while you were finding those, while you're reading those stats off, I was like, I gotta find a way if I can.
I have two more. So
okay, got it.
To bring sports, just a little sports tidbit. So the most popular sport here is rugby. And there's, different codes of rugby, different rules. So if the rugby that's played here in New Zealand is called rugby union, you can look it up. But the national teams of New Zealand, the men's team are called the All Blacks, quite famous. All Blacks,
good.
They're quite good. They've won the Rugby World Cup 3 times. That they're called the All Blacks because they wear just very plain black uniforms, and then before their matches, they do a traditional Maori dance, which is called the haka. It's pretty moving experience. I would definitely suggest looking it up if you haven't already seen it. But the women's rugby team, known as the Black Ferns, they have won the Rugby World Cup 5 times.
Whoa!
And incredibly successful. That's my sports facts.
This is just my American Steve speaking. How often is the Rugby World Cup? Is it like the Soccer World Cup where it's every 4 years?
I might need to check that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I sort of follow it a bit because I follow Wales
every 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're playing in the Six Nations right now. They play tomorrow. They play England. But yeah, I feel like New Zealand is always just.
How have I not known this about you?
I don't
follow
know.
Rugby.
I keep it on the back.
This has never come up before. I don't know.
Keep it on the back burner.
Yeah.
But I feel like New Zealand always just smokes people.
They do. But yeah.
Yeah.
So Kiwis are quite good at rugby considering the size of the country, and everybody plays it here.
I guess to add on to your little stat about more animals than humans in New Zealand, only 5% of the entire living population of New Zealand is human.
Wow. Wow.
I don't know how they came up. This is kind of funny. There's one more I went to. You're never more than 128 kilometers from the coast in New Zealand.
Yep.
Wow.
And no snakes in New Zealand. Have you noticed that since being there?
Yep. Other New Zealand facts. New Zealand was the first country to give women the right to vote.
Oh,
good for them.
And we have a pretty famous prime minister right now, Jacinda Ardern. She's
no joke.
She's doing very well. She just was reelected. Well, her government was reelected last October, so she's doing pretty well.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's like being like an hour from the shore everywhere.
Yeah. So I was saying, like growing up in Pennsylvania, you just going to the beach is a treat, but in New Zealand, it's like, it's like whatever, just do it. Easy.
So who else likes the beach is the penguins in New Zealand, and New Zealand is home to. New Zealand has more species of penguin than anywhere else in the world.
How about?
How would you guys think a Kiwi would say penguins? Maybe you guys can do a pronunciation.
This is gonna be so weird.
Penguin.
Yeah.
I got nothing.
I don't know.
I don't first Pinguini.
What?
It sounds like we should censor that word out. I don't know.
I was thinking it was like an offensive version of an Italian accent.
Yeah. So you want to learn some more about me? My favorite animal is
Oh, your favorite animal is the penguin.
Yeah.
Your spirit animal.
My spirit animal is probably a moose. I feel like I'm more of my favorite animal.
Yeah.
I remember we were on a trip years ago for a conference up in New Hampshire, and remember we were just like, we saw those moose the moose signs, just waiting to see a moose, but nothing.
Not
a single moose. The whole 2 times we were up in New Hampshire.
That was cold.
It was cold. That was yeah.
So is there no like snake whacking day? Because there's no snakes.
I don't think so. I mean, there's Australia's got the snakes.
If no snakes, like you just be frolicking through the tall bushes and shorts and no shoes on.
That's what everybody says, but I've come across wild pigs several times on my bicycle, and you got to be mindful of that.
Let me tell you, I grew up with a pig, and they are just mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a domesticated pig.
Yeah.
Jesse had a pet pig and a pet rabbit that were best friends.
Yeah, Bubba and Toots.
Right.
Bubba and Toots.
You are definitely from Pottsville, man.
And then
I can't wait for the Bubba and Toots podcast.
I don't think Bubba and Toots are with us anymore, but
no. And when Toots died, Bubba became mean. He was a grumpy old man because his buddy died.
Was Bubba the pig or was Toots the pig?
Bubba was the pig. Yeah,
Bubba
would try and chomp you.
Oh,
and if a pig bites you, like it's no joke.
Mm.
My mom, her hand got bit the one time, and she needed stitches and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Anything else, Matt? About any fun facts about New Zealand?
I mean, I think that's the extent of my facts.
We covered a lot of stuff, man. I mean, we covered the tectonic.
Well, I want this to be the launching point, because I've only been here a year, so I'm not an expert, but just questions and things, just pop them in there wherever you guys have your chat forum, and then just get inspired.
Yeah, you can check us out at geologyflannelcast.com. Listener questions. Oh yeah, how do they say penguin? Sorry, everybody's waiting on the edge of the seat.
I think they would say penguins.
Penguins.
How's your New Zealand accent?
That's not happening. So I've looked it up. I looked it up quite a bit. So I think a lot of your cultural identity and the accent that you speak with is pretty much cemented, before your early teens.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'll ever get a New Zealand accent for however long it is that I stay here.
I think you just need to watch more Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we do want to talk a bit about New Zealand culture, Flight of the Conchords is a great television series. And then 2 of my favorite New Zealand movies are, one is called Whale Rider. I would highly recommend that. It's like a really inspiring story about a girl growing up to become the leader of her village. And then the second movie that I would recommend is called The Hunt for the Wilder People. It's starring the gentleman from Jurassic Park. He's actually a Kiwi guy.
Yeah,
Sam Neill. And
Sam Neill was New Zealand.
How about that?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a hilarious movie. The director is Taika Waititi. He's a pretty famous guy. He most recently directed Jojo Rabbit. So.
Yeah, he does. Does he do like Marvel? Did he do something Marvel movie too, or something?
I think he did one of the Thor films.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you know who else was another famous New Zealand resident? Sir Edmund Hillary, the first person to summit Mount Everest.
Look at that.
And where did he cut his teeth? The Southern Alps.
Mount Cook. Yeah.
Yep.
So he was actually the second person.
It's Tenzing Norgay.
Yeah,
was the first person.
I have you were talking about getting your accent. I know people who have done like a summer abroad when they were kids, and they come back with like British accents. I'm like, what? you lived in Delaware County your whole life, right? Now all of a sudden you're British. But I think you're right, Matt. There is something to it as to when in your life you actually start hearing that. There's a new HBO series coming out, and Kate Winslet is in it, and she had to learn a Delco accent for this role because it's filmed in Delaware County, and she said it made her so angry, this Delco accent, that she actually started to throw stuff.
I love Bradley Cooper's Philadelphia, Pennsylvania accent, man. His is a classic.
But to Kate Winslet's credit, she did say that Wawa is now a big part of her life.
It's a solid convenience store, man. Like it's. I know.
I mean, we can talk. We don't have to talk about Wawa, but those soft pretzels are just.
How many cheesesteaks do you have out in New Zealand?
Not many.
It's a business opportunity right there.
Yeah, right there.
Not many.
But
one of the most popular foods here is Kiwis love meat pies. So just like if you go to the UK, so it's a savory pie crust, a nice handheld package, and one of the most popular flavors is mince and cheese. So it'd be ground beef and cheese or steak and cheese. So it's basically a Philly cheese steak in a pie.
You're making me hungry.
They love them. They love them.
I'm in.
Yeah. So
let's start a meat pie franchise.
We should.
You would do well.
Done. We should get the New Zealand Tourism Board to start sponsoring us here.
Yes,
you should.
Fly us in to immerse us.
Yes.
I'll quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel.
Yeah. And we may or may not pay the bill.
Well, all right. I think that
I like it.
Note,
seriously, all we have to do is pay for the plane ticket, and then it sounds like we get 2 weeks free food and
let's get the offer first, all right? Before we start figuring this out.
Three hots and a cot. That was the 3 hot meals and a cot to sleep on.
There you go.
Well, all right. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This is a blast.
Seriously,
catching up with you and talking New Zealand geology, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming on again. You're up there. You and Kelly Blake are tied for the most appearances on the Geology Flannelcast. So
Kelly, if you're listening, just
you got some competition, Kelly.
I'm just saying, you better up your game. Kelly also is a geothermal expert.
Exactly.
So
right.
I guess we're biased.
You guys have a type. You like the geothermalists.
We do.
So, well, thank you again, Matt. Always a pleasure. Anytime you want, open invite. Come back on the show. We love you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone out there, for listening to the podcast. Check out geologyflannelcast.com. We'll post links that we've mentioned on the podcast up there on the website under the episodes. So if you have any geology questions that you'd like to answer eventually, we every once in a while we'll have a listener questions episode. So you can email us your these burning geology questions that keep you up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, but if you want to move to the front of the line, you could always become a Patreon member. Because if you get to a certain tier of the Patreon membership, you get to request a subject
whole episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, what else? So if you'd like to help out the podcast, you can help us out on Patreon. We have several different tiers of subscribers there, starting as low as $2 a month. So thank you again for all the people that have helped us out on Patreon. We love you guys.
Thank you.
Very appreciative. Thank you very much. Let's see. We're on Twitter. We're at GeoFlannelcast. What's our Instagram handle? I haven't even done the Instagram thing. Or are we just Geology Flannelcast on Instagram?
I think so.
All right.
I just posted, but
We're really up on this stuff.
Yeah. Well, kids these days with the Insta and whatnot.
I took a picture of us doing this. I'm going to post it right now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, and Facebook.
A regular influencer.
Yes. Facebook.com. Geology Flannelcast. I try to at least update when our episodes are in. So.
Oh yeah, are we going to do? I think so. we briefly talked about doing another little contest, mineral March Madness or something.
Ooh, that's right.
Coming up.
I was talking to a friend of the podcast, Vince, and we were trying to work it out. And I was thinking maybe if we do 4 brackets, igneous metamorphic sedimentary mineral, who is the ultimate rock?
Oh.
We pit them all against each other.
And then what? People vote?
People vote. Yeah, we'll go through the rounds and people vote. And the winner will obviously be anthracite coal.
Cinderella story. Cinderella story out of Pottsville, Pennsylvania.
Let's pick the rock that has no minerals in it. All right.
Anyway, no,
beautiful.
yeah. So that's a little teaser there. Get your brains working. We will get that bracket up.
All right. And thanks for Steve. Steve's got COVID right now, but he is hanging in there. Just, he's a trooper.
If this is my last episode, I appreciate everybody. I love y'all. This was Matt Sophie's job interview. So
goodbye, Steve.
The look on Sophie's face right now.
He's like, I'm not doing this every week.
He's good. Once every 6 years, he's good.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening for the whole episode. We love you guys. And we'll see you again with another action-packed episode next week of the Premier Geology Podcast. Thanks a lot. Tell a friend if you like us. And
check you later.
Stay safe out there, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.